Is the simplest explanation usually the right one, or is it just the most convenient lie? Today we're talking about Occam's razor, the go to tool of logic lovers, and Occam's broom, its shady twin used to sweep inconvenient facts under the rug. We'll explain what these principles mean, where they come from, and how they play out in science, politics, conspiracy theories, and everyday thinking.
The principle is named after William of Occam. He was a Franciscan friar and a scholastic philosopher circa around the years 1287 to 1347. Now, he never stated the principle exactly as we phrase it today, but he advocated for ontological parsimony. This is the idea that one should not posit more entities than are necessary to explain a phenomenon. Occam was reacting to the bloated metaphysical frameworks of his time, particularly in theology and natural philosophy, where explanations for natural events are often involving complex layers of divine or angelic causality.
It can be used in science, medicine, law, and even detective work. In medicine, diagnosing one's illness that explains all symptoms versus assuming multiple rare conditions. In science, heliocentrism explained planetary motion more cleanly than Ptolemy's complex epicycles. And also in detective work, the husband did it isn't just cliche, it's statistically sound.
When Darwin introduced natural selection, it was a more parsimonious mechanism than invoking intelligent design. If unified diverse biological observations under one explanatory umbrella.
Let's jump over to Occam's broom. It was coined by Dr. Sidney Brenner, a biologist. It describes the act of deliberately ignoring, omitting, or hiding evidence that contradicts a preferred explanation or theory. Basically, let's make this look simple by leaving stuff out. Where you see Occam's broom in action, politics, governments leaving out key context or cherry picking data, corporate PR. We value transparency while ignoring a buried report. Conspiracy theories. Ironically, many use the appearance of simplicity by ignoring inconvenient facts. So, can you think of a time someone used simplicity to avoid an uncomfortable truth? Now, granted, right off the top of your head, that's probably hard to do. So, the follow up question would be: are humans naturally biased towards simple answers, even if they're wrong?
I think what happens is just from a sociological perspective, I think humans have a bias towards their own beliefs or their own protection or themselves, just in totality, right? So whenever it comes to certain questions, if it paints them in a bad light, they're going to create an elaborate story in their head that they start positing out into the ether. A lot of times things can be just a simple yes or no answer, and will overcomplicate it of why it's yes or no and run themselves around a mountain that completely contradicts originally what they even said in the first place. It's wild, but I think a lot of times you have to take their own personal bias into context.
Yeah, I think if especially with the first question, to avoid an uncomfortable truth, that would be more of a yes no answer, right? Without getting into details, right?
True. I imagine whenever you say simple yes no answers, an uncomfortable truth would be whenever somebody is being asked, "Hey,
What's wrong?
did you do this?" Or yeah, even what's wrong because that's open-ended.
Are humans naturally biased towards simple answers, even if they're wrong? Yeah, like you said, you can be biased towards your own bias by simply saying less. Maybe you can get out of what happened,
Right.
or or whatnot. Me and you discussed off air that Occam's razor or Occam's broom is probably in your life every day, whether it's media, whether it's uh, coworkers, whether it's a relationship you're in.
True.
People twist truths. People just leave out facts.
Yeah. Inconvenient truths.
Yeah, I
Yes.
don't think it's anything you get away from if you are in a social situation.
That's very true. And I don't know if, because now we're getting into a lot of sociological perspectives of it. And I don't know if this is what the authors intended, because
I don't think so.
originally, like we said with Occam's razor, that was from a Franciscan friar that was trying to confront a lot of bias in his own industry of theology.
Well, do you think people use Occam's razor or abuse it?
Man, honestly, I haven't paid enough attention to know whether or not it's utilized correctly or abused.
Have you ever realized something important got broomed away in a story you were told?
Oh yeah,
Usually later on.
true. Well, s- sometimes, I mean, whenever we get into like a media or political context, the news cycle moves so fast nowadays that a lot of times we know certain facts about a particular story before the press report on it, or before there's an official narrative put out, or say the a particular politician or an authoritative agency has comments about it. There are certain things being put out in the ethos by social media. Not all of it correct. There is a lot of Occam's broom and Occam's razor that is either being employed or not being employed correctly.
So you can definitely say that there's problems and limits to it. If you can expand on this, definitely go ahead. They say Occam's razor's problems simple isn't always true. Reality can be complex, and assuming the simplest answer might blind us to nuance. Also, it can lead to laziness in thinking. That sounds too complicated, so it must be wrong.
That's very, very true. But there are certain things, especially when we get into the scientific realm. One of the things that we heard for a long time, especially uh, during 2020, was the science is settled. Right? That was a very, very popular theme. The one thing about science is always expanding. You can have a hypothesis, you can have a theory. That's usually all they are until you have an overwhelming amount of data that can prove that it's no longer theory and it's now scientific fact, right? So, science is never actually settled. You could go a couple hundred years and then you find a scientific fact that contradicts the prevailing theories or the prevailing facts at the time.
To me, I think the razor might be outdated compared to the broom in modern times.
Well, I believe broom is used more expeditiously, simply because it allows propaganda and sensationalism to flourish very easily. And it doesn't matter what subject we're talking about, whether it's politics, media, science is now definitely getting into the mode of propaganda in order for certain individuals to profit based on the facts that they're desiring to be true.
Suppressing data corrupts science and public trust. It contributes to misinformation, bias, and manipulation. It's hard to spot when you're the one holding the broom. I would think that we are absolutely in the day and age of Occam's broom.
Very true.
Where's the line between simplifying and oversimplifying? That's a personal thing, wouldn't you say?
I would say so, because if you oversimplify it, I don't think you're paying enough attention to all the facts. I don't think you are evaluating everything thoroughly.
And I think I'm maybe an overanalyzer.
There are some people that do that simply because they say overanalyzation can paralyze decision making. You never can come to a conclusion because you're overanalyzing everything.
Is Occam's razor a tool for clarity or a weapon to shut down deeper thinking?
It depends on who's utilizing it. It can definitely be both.
I think it would be a good thing to apply both to your life. Use Occam's razor as a mental model. Start simple, but stay open to complexity. Watch out for Occam's broom in conversations, news, and even self talk. What facts are you leaving out to keep things neat? Life is messy. Sometimes the best answer is simple, but it's rarely convenient.
So, if we could get into some real world examples, a pharmaceutical company publishes a study showing their drug reduces symptoms, but they omit data from the trials that show minimal or no effect. Now, Occam's razor might say drug A works better than the placebo, where Occam's broom reveals important trials were swept away, skewing the conclusion. Example 2, we could go to something like climate change denial. A politician says Earth's temperature goes up and down, it's natural. What's omitted? 100 plus years of temperature trend data, greenhouse gas emissions, and feedback loops. A simple story is crafted by excluding complexity, a hallmark of Occam's broom.
Occam's razor helps us cut through the noise. Occam's broom reminds us to check what's swept under the rug. Together, they shape how we understand or misunderstand the truth. I leave you with this. What's the simplest explanation you've ever believed that turned out to be wrong?